Rick Harrison, gravel-voiced, sharp-eyed, and endlessly strategic, transformed a modest pawn shop into a reality TV goldmine. But behind the fame, the fortune, and the vintage Ferraris lies a story of obsession, family fracture, and the relentless pursuit of power. This is the life of Rick Harrison in 2025. Wealthy, controversial, and more enigmatic than ever. 1. From school dropout to Vegas royalty. Rick Harrison's empire didn't begin in gold. It began in struggle. Born in Lexington, North Carolina in 1965, Rick's early years were marked by a nomadic lifestyle, shaped by a Navy father and a family that would eventually settle in San Diego. By the time he was in his early teens, Rick had found himself not in classrooms, but in business. He dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, captivated not by algebra, but by the thrill of the deal. It was during his epilepsy-ridden adolescence, where long days confined to bed pushed him to devour history books and crime novels, that Rick cultivated the mind of a hustler and the memory of a historian. Those quiet, isolated days lit a fire, a hunger to outthink and outmaneuver anyone who underestimated him. In the early 1980s, the Harrison family made a leap: Las Vegas. It was there, among the flashing lights and endless promise of fortune, that Rick and his father, Richard Old Man Harrison, opened the Gold and Silver Coin Shop, a modest storefront on Las Vegas Boulevard, barely more than a shadow under the looming casinos. Rick quickly learned that pawning was part knowledge, part poker face. The shop evolved into the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop in 1989, and from that cracked tile floor and steel counter, Rick Harrison would rewrite his future. It wasn't glamorous, not yet, but it was his, and he was just getting started. 2. Pawn Stars, the birth of a reality TV empire. By the early 2000s, gold and silver had become a local landmark, but Rick saw more than foot traffic and rare coins. He saw a story. A reality show had never been set in a pawn shop, so Rick pitched, again and again. For 4 long years, he was ignored, rejected, laughed out of meetings, until 2009. History Channel took a gamble on a rough concept called Pawn Stars, and Rick Harrison's life changed forever. It wasn't just a show, it was a phenomenon. The mix of historical trivia, high-stakes negotiations, and eccentric clientele made it an instant hit. Suddenly, Rick wasn't just a pawnbroker. He was a household name. With his son Corey, his childhood friend Chumley, and his father, the Old Man, by his side, Rick brought family dynamics, antique revolvers, and priceless artifacts into America's living rooms. Behind the scenes, he negotiated lucrative licensing deals, opened multiple business ventures, and secured millions in syndication and rerun royalties. But with the fame came pressure. Schedules became brutal. Public appearances were non-stop. Fans flooded the shop daily, hoping for a glimpse of the Pawn Stars. Rick's focus shifted from deals to image, from wheeling and dealing to producing a brand that could live beyond the show. Even as the ratings soared, internal cracks began to show. Fame made the pawn shop a fortress, and Rick its king. 3. Behind the counter, family tensions and TV drama. Beneath the shine of Pawn Stars lay a slow-burning tension, one that no amount of money could fix. As the cameras rolled and profits soared, Rick's relationship with his son Corey began to fray. What began as light-hearted banter turned into veiled jabs. Episodes became battlegrounds for control, and viewers noticed the shift. Then came the blow no one saw coming: the death of Richard Old Man Harrison in 2018. The patriarch of the Harrison family, known for his deadpan delivery and gruff wisdom, had been the glue holding them together. His passing shattered more than hearts. It exposed fractures that had long been papered over by scripts and contracts. The drama spilled off-screen. In the reading of the will, Rick was named the sole beneficiary of Old Man's estate. Corey and his brother Chris were notably absent. Rumors swirled. Was it revenge? Was it protection? Rick never gave a straight answer, fueling tabloids and dividing fans. Meanwhile, Chumlee faced legal issues, adding further strain. Though Rick stood by him publicly, insiders whispered of growing frustration behind closed doors. Loyalty, it seemed, had its limits. By 2025, the once tight-knit crew had drifted apart. The pawn shop still thrived, but the family dynasty was no longer united. Rick remained at the center, stoic, successful, and increasingly alone in his empire of gold and ghosts. 4. Millions in memorabilia. Rick's hidden treasure trove. Inside the unassuming walls of the gold and silver pawn shop lies a vault that few have ever seen, Rick Harrison's private collection. While everyday tourists clamor for t-shirts and replicas, Rick's real obsession lies behind locked doors, a meticulously curated trove of rare Americana, historic weapons, autographed artifacts, and priceless oddities. Over the years, Rick used his TV platform not just to sell, but to acquire. Civil War rifles, samurai swords, signed Beatles albums, 19th century currency, and even a fragment of a moon rock, all stashed away in climate-controlled secrecy. For Rick, these weren't just investments, they were trophies, symbols of battles won and negotiations conquered. Some items never even made it to the shop floor. They were whisked away during filming, quietly added to Rick's personal archive. Insiders say he keeps a catalog with detailed entries, value, provenance, negotiation history, even emotional significance. One former employee called it a museum nobody's allowed to see. As Pawn Star's fame grew, so did the offers. Celebrities, collectors, even museums approached Rick to buy or borrow pieces. He declined most. For all his public persona, Rick remains obsessively private about what he truly values. "I don't sell everything," he once said. "Some things you hold on to because no amount of money replaces the story." That philosophy, part passion, part pride, has built a fortune in artifacts that rivals actual museums. In 2025, the full scope of Rick's collection is still unknown. But one thing is clear, he's not just a broker of history. He's become a keeper of it. 5. The Las Vegas mansion that built a legend. Far from the glitter of the Strip, tucked behind gated communities and guarded hedges, lies Rick Harrison's sprawling Las Vegas mansion, a 7,000-square-foot sanctuary where opulence meets obsession. The estate is a fortress of taste and testosterone. A sweeping stone driveway leads to a multi-garage setup housing rare vehicles, while inside, the home opens into vaulted ceilings, iron chandeliers, and walls adorned with vintage firearms and taxidermy. Each room tells a story. Each artifact has a past. It's not a house, it's a living portfolio. The centerpiece? A climate-controlled library lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves of antique books, war memorabilia, and collector's-grade weaponry. In the back, a hidden vault holds not just gold and cash, but hard drives containing the digital records of every deal Rick has made for the past 20 years. The home also boasts a custom-built wine cellar, a poker room modeled after a 1930s speakeasy, and a cigar lounge where business and pleasure often blur. It's where he entertains VIP clients, closes six-figure deals, and retreats when the cameras stop rolling. But wealth can't always buy peace. The mansion has seen its share of legal papers and heated arguments, particularly following the fallout with Corey and the contested inheritance. Rumors of surveillance systems, estranged visits, and hired security have turned Rick's private paradise into a symbol of guarded success. In Las Vegas, where fortunes rise and fall overnight, Rick Harrison built a home meant to outlast the chaos. A castle, yes, but also a bunker. 6. Chrome, leather, and horsepower. Rick's classic car obsession. If history is Rick Harrison's first love, cars are a very, very close second. The garages of his Las Vegas compound house, a collection that would make any gearhead weep. Vintage Mustangs, pristine Corvettes, a '57 Chevy Bel Air, a Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, and even a rare Shelby Cobra replica that Rick calls his weekend religion. These aren't museum pieces. They're machines he drives, lives with, and obsesses over. His love for classic cars began long before Pawn Stars, back when Rick was hustling in Vegas pawn shops and scraping together cash for a beat-up Camaro. Now, with millions at his disposal, he spares no expense restoring these mechanical masterpieces to showroom perfection. He's a regular at Barrett-Jackson auctions and has personal connections with top-tier restoration shops across the country. But Rick doesn't collect for prestige. He collects for emotion. "Every car has a soul," he once told an interviewer. "You hear it when the engine starts." But with horsepower comes headaches. Maintenance costs are astronomical. Insurance is specialized. And not every deal ends well. Rick has famously walked away from high-dollar purchases after sniffing out fake parts or bad provenance. One deal gone wrong even ended in court, a reminder that in the world of vintage vehicles, fraud rides shotgun. In 2025, his collection is rumored to be valued north of $3 million. But for Rick, it's never just about the price tag. It's about nostalgia, control, the rush of the engine and the echo of a time when things, like chrome and steel, were built to last. 7. A life of wealth. But at what cost? Rick Harrison stands as a portrait of the American dream realized. A self-made millionaire, TV mogul, and cultural icon. But the higher he climbed, the more personal sacrifices were buried beneath the glitz. Multiple divorces, estranged relationships, and quiet custody battles form the undercurrent of Rick's personal life. Rarely discussed, almost never acknowledged publicly. His second wife, Tracy, left quietly. His third marriage, to Deanna Burdett, ended after nearly a decade, with rumors of emotional distance and irreconcilable lifestyles. Though Rick framed the split as amicable, insiders painted a picture of two people living in separate worlds, one consumed by business, the other yearning for intimacy. Even his relationship with his children became strained over the years. Corey, once his right hand at the shop, began appearing less frequently. And while Rick continued to build his empire, the cost of that drive became evident. A life spent in motion, always closing a deal, never quite present. Behind the camera-ready grin and rehearsed one-liners is a man who, by 2025, has everything money can buy, except time he can't rewind. Some close to Rick say he's haunted by it, that beneath the collector's cool demeanor lies regret. For missed birthdays, for rushed goodbyes, for building a kingdom but not a home. He owns history, but he can't rewrite his own. 8. Fame, lawsuits, and the price of celebrity. With fame came lawsuits, inevitable, public, and ruthless. In recent years, Rick Harrison found himself not only managing a pawn empire, but fending off legal attacks from all sides. In 2022, his own mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, filed a lawsuit against him, alleging fraud and elder financial abuse. The claim, Rick had mishandled her portion of the family trust and manipulated control of assets following the death of the old man. The lawsuit stunned fans and sent media outlets into a frenzy. Rick denied all allegations, calling the claims baseless and deeply hurtful. Still, the damage was done. For the first time, America saw a chink in the armor of TV's most famous pawnbroker. More lawsuits followed, disputes with former employees, vendors claiming breach of contract, and others accusing the gold and silver brand of shady business practices. Though Rick settled some privately, others dragged on in courtrooms, chipping away at the pristine image Pawn Stars had long cultivated. Online, the narrative began to shift. Social media lit up with debates. Was Rick a misunderstood genius protecting his legacy, or a ruthless mogul driven by greed? Through it all, Rick never blinked. He continued filming, continued negotiating, but the sparkle had dulled. The smile was tighter, the trust harder to earn. Celebrity, it seemed, came with its own price tag, and even Rick couldn't haggle his way out of this one. 9. Loss, legacy, and the ghosts of gold and silver. As the years pressed on, Rick Harrison found himself surrounded not just by antiques, but by memories, some precious, others painful. The death of his father, the iconic old man, in 2018, still casts a long shadow. Rick keeps a photo of him behind the main counter, a quiet reminder of where it all began. But while the gold and silver pawn shop still draws thousands of tourists each year, something has changed. The shop that once felt like a family business now resembles a branded attraction. Slicker, colder, more corporate. Rick's legacy is undeniable. He transformed a niche business into a global franchise. He educated millions about history, built a net worth in the tens of millions, and turned his name into a brand that will likely outlive him. But legacy isn't just about money or fame. It's about what remains when the lights go out. There are whispers that Rick has begun preparing for succession, that he's quietly mentoring new leadership, perhaps even selling partial stakes in the business to secure its future. Corey remains distant. The shop, though profitable, may not stay in the family. The empire is still standing, but its architect is older now, more reflective. In the quiet moments, after the cameras cut, after the last tourist leaves, Rick Harrison walks the floor of the pawn shop alone, surrounded by relics, haunted by absence. Everything he's ever loved is for sale. 10. Still hustling. Rick Harrison's 2025 power moves. Despite the lawsuits, family rifts, and personal losses, Rick Harrison isn't slowing down. In 2025, the 59-year-old mogul remains a force of nature in both the pawn world and the wider Las Vegas business landscape. And while the old Rick built his empire on the art of the deal, the new Rick is reshaping it with calculated reinvention. He's expanded the gold and silver brand beyond its brick-and-mortar roots. With a new online auction platform tailored to high-end collectors, Rick is targeting a global audience. Bidding wars for rare items now happen in real time across continents. It's digital pawning at its most elite, and Rick is at the helm, merging history with modern commerce. He's also invested heavily in Las Vegas real estate, purchasing commercial properties off the Strip and leasing them to boutique ventures, antique dealers, whiskey lounges, even speakeasy-style museums. Each investment seems to mirror a part of Rick himself. Nostalgic, profitable, slightly mysterious. And then there's the rumor, persistent and growing, that Rick is in talks to produce a scripted TV series based on his life. Not Pawn Stars, but something deeper, more dramatic. A show about power, family, betrayal, and survival. The Rick Harrison story, unfiltered. He still appears on Pawn Stars, Do America, the spin-off series that sees Rick and crew traveling across the country. But those who know him say the spark is shifting, that Rick is less interested in appraisal and more focused on immortality. He's no longer just a businessman. He's becoming a legacy builder. In 2025, Rick Harrison isn't finished. He's just playing a longer game. Rick Harrison built his fortune on forgotten treasures, but his real legacy may lie in the empire he forged, and the ghosts he couldn't outrun. From pawn shop counters to private vaults, Las Vegas mansions to courtrooms, his story is a cautionary tale wrapped in gold and grit. Subscribe for more untold stories behind the fame.